Welcome to a place where silence turns into fire, where loneliness gives way to desire, and where forgotten hearts are set ablaze by the power of true love. Here, we don't just tell stories, we relive them. The ache of invisibility, the moment a single gaze shatters decades of emptiness, the trembling rebirth of passion, and the liberation found in love so deep it consumes everything in its path. Every word, every touch, every kiss carries the raw intensity of being seen, wanted, and cherished again. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to be awakened after years of silence, to be held so tightly that time itself surrenders, you've come to the right place. This is not fantasy, this is life. This is truth. This is love reborn. The silence in the house grew heavier with each passing year, a silence that was not just the absence of sound, but the absence of being seen. Days folded into each other like faded pages in a book no one cared to open. The mornings came with the same dull rhythm, the kettle boiling, the quiet hum of the clock, the soft creak of a chair that held the same body it had held yesterday, and the day before that, and the year before that. Outside, life moved fast, but inside, it felt as though time had slowed to a crawl, trapping everything in shadows that whispered of what had been lost. There was a time when glances followed wherever the steps went, when the world seemed alive with acknowledgement. A smile once drew echoes of admiration, a laugh once pulled people closer. Now, faces passed by without recognition, eyes slid away as if the figure standing there had blended into the background, no longer important, no longer visible. The mirror told the story more brutally than any words could. It no longer reflected youth, but lines carved by years of giving and years of waiting. It showed eyes that once sparkled, now dimmed with the weight of being unseen. Loneliness is not just the absence of company. It is the ache of existing without being noticed. It is walking into a room and realizing no one's gaze lingers, no one feels compelled to draw closer. It is hearing conversations that don't pause for the presence entering or leaving. That kind of loneliness eats at the core, making even the brightest light feel dim. And when desire fades into silence, when the fire that once lit the body begins to cool, it feels like the final theft, the theft of aliveness. The years stretched long, filled with responsibilities, routines, and the quiet acceptance that maybe passion belonged only to the past. The body that once moved with confidence now felt like an abandoned house, walls standing but no warmth inside. Every touch once carried electricity, but now, touch itself had become foreign. The skin had forgotten the shiver of anticipation, the breathless pause before lips met, the trembling hunger that once defined intimacy. Desire had not just been quieted, it had been buried, covered under layers of neglect and the cruel passage of time. Sometimes the memories resurfaced, uninvited but powerful. The memory of being wanted with intensity, of being held as though the world outside didn't exist, of hearing words whispered not out of duty but out of raw hunger. Those memories burned like embers in the chest, both comforting and painful. Comforting because they proved such moments had once existed, painful because they reminded of what was now gone. The mirror mocked with its truth. Youth was fleeting, beauty was temporary, and in the eyes of the world, so too was value. But beneath the silence, beneath the routine, there was still something restless, something unbroken. It whispered late at night when the sheets felt too cold, when the air carried the ache of longing. It asked quietly if it was really too late, if passion truly had an expiration date, or if it had simply been waiting for something powerful enough to awaken it. The days outside grew louder, while inside they stayed quiet. Yet inside the chest the heart beat stubbornly, as if it refused to fully surrender. Every glance into the mirror may have shown fading youth, but it also showed resilience, the survival of storms, the endurance of pain. There was still life in those eyes, even if no one noticed it anymore. And though desire seemed forgotten, The body still carried its memory, waiting in silence, waiting for a spark strong enough to breathe it back into existence. That ache of invisibility was not just about being overlooked by others. It was about being overlooked by time, by fate, by destiny itself. There was a yearning so deep it almost hurt to admit a yearning not just to be loved, but to be desired, to be wanted with intensity, to feel alive in both body and soul. Loneliness carved its mark, but it did not erase the hunger for connection. Even when the world stopped seeing, even when the mirror reflected shadows instead of light, the fire remained hidden, waiting for the one gaze strong enough to ignite it again. And when that gaze finally arrived, everything would change. It happened in a moment so ordinary that it almost slipped by unnoticed, yet it changed everything. A glance that should have meant nothing lingered far too long, and in that lingering, something cracked open. His eyes held mine with a kind of fire I hadn't felt in years, not the polite courtesy of someone looking out of habit, but the raw and unguarded truth of someone seeing deeply, not just looking, but seeing. At first, it startled me, like a sudden rush of warmth into a room gone cold. The instinct was to look away, to protect myself from the vulnerability of being noticed, because to be seen after so many years of invisibility felt dangerous, almost unbearable. Yet the pull was stronger than the fear. His eyes carried no pity, no obligation, only hunger wrapped in tenderness, curiosity threaded with quiet reverence. In that single gaze, walls that had taken decades to build trembled as though they were made of glass. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic declaration, just the silence of two souls holding each other through eyes, as if words would only weaken what was already being spoken. The numbness that had wrapped itself around my life like a shroud began to break, piece by piece, until warmth seeped in where only coldness had been. For years, I had walked through rooms unnoticed, through days unremarkable, through mirrors that showed me fading. But in that moment, all of that disappeared. His eyes reminded me of something I thought had been buried forever, the undeniable truth of being wanted. The world around us continued as if nothing extraordinary was happening, but inside, something alive stirred with reckless force. It wasn't just desire that rose, though desire was there, sharp and insistent. It was the rebirth of feeling, the reminder that life still had the power to surprise, to awaken, to resurrect what had been sleeping for too long. The gaze was not casual. It was deliberate, as though he had chosen me, as though the years etched across my face and the quiet ache in my soul were not flaws, but maps that led him closer. It frightened me almost as much as it thrilled me. To be wanted again after years of being overlooked felt like standing in the sun after endless winters. My body remembered things my mind had tried to forget, the trembling anticipation of being touched, the ache that comes before a kiss, the dizzying rush of being desired without restraint. His eyes carried the promise of all of that and more. In that moment, I understood something simple and devastating. Invisibility had not killed me, but it had numbed me, and now one glance had undone it all. I could feel life rushing back into places that had long been dormant, like a river breaking through a dam. Every heartbeat seemed louder, every breath deeper, as if the body itself rejoiced at being awakened. It wasn't only the hunger that burned there, though that hunger made my skin shiver. It was the tenderness, the kind of tenderness that makes you feel safe even while your world is being undone. His eyes told me he wanted me, but they also told me he respected me, cherished me, saw something worth holding on to. It was a dangerous combination, because hunger alone could be dismissed, but hunger wrapped in care was irresistible. The silence stretched between us, heavy but alive, filled with everything unspoken. In that silence, I felt years of loneliness crack apart, leaving room for something new. He had no idea how much that look meant, how it reached inside and pulled me back to life. Or maybe he did know, and maybe that was why he didn't look away. Even later, when the moment had passed, it lingered in me like a flame refusing to go out. I could still feel his gaze pressed against my skin, as if it had branded me with a truth I could no longer deny. That look had not only awakened desire, it had awakened hope. And once hope stirs, there is no returning to emptiness. It was in his eyes that I found myself again, alive, seen, and burning. It began quietly, so quietly it almost felt like an accident. Words that should have meant nothing carried weight, each one lingering long after it was spoken. A hand brushing against mine in passing sent a shiver through me so strong I had to steady my breath, pretending it was nothing, though inside it felt like the beginning of everything. The smallest moments grew louder, until even silence between us seemed charged, humming with something that neither of us dared to name out loud. There was warmth, but with it came fear of what it meant to want again, fear of being foolish, fear of opening a heart that had been closed for so long. Yet even with the fear, longing pressed forward, unrelenting. The more it was resisted, the stronger it became, weaving itself into every glance, every accidental touch, every breath shared too close. The first kiss was not planned. It came in a rush, born out of restraint finally breaking. The world blurred in that moment, and there was nothing but the heat of his mouth, the taste of him, the urgency that pulled us closer as though distance itself had become unbearable. It was not a polite kiss, not hesitant or measured. It was desperate, hungry, the kind of kiss that doesn't just touch the lips, but reaches all the way into the soul, shaking something awake that had been asleep for far too long. Loneliness was consumed instantly, burned away by a fire that roared to life inside me. For years I had lived in quiet, convincing myself that passion was behind me, that my body no longer remembered how to ache, no longer needed to tremble. But in that kiss, in the weight of his hand at the back of my neck, pulling me closer as though he couldn't get enough, everything came rushing back. My body answered before my mind could think, responding with a raw, unguarded need that left me breathless. It was overwhelming, not just the physical hunger, but the emotional flood that came with it. To be wanted like that, to be kissed as though I was the only one in the world, filled me with a joy so sharp it almost hurt. My heart raced, my skin burned, every nerve alive, as if my body had been waiting in silence for this exact moment, waiting to remember what it meant to feel alive. And it did remember. It remembered the sweetness of being touched with reverence, the thrill of surrendering to something greater than fear, the beauty of giving in without holding back. His touch did not just awaken desire, it healed something deeper, something broken. The loneliness that had lived inside me for years shrank in the face of such intensity, as though it was never real, as though all of it had been leading to this. Every kiss that followed carried the same fire, each one burning deeper, drawing me closer into a place I had thought no longer existed. My soul, starved for connection, drank it in greedily. My body, long silenced, came alive with every brush of his hand, every whisper against my skin, every moment where I felt his desire meet my own. It was not just passion, though passion ran wild and unrestrained. It was love, too, a love that grew in the way he looked at me when our lips finally broke apart, in the way his touch lingered not just with urgency, but with tenderness. Desire alone could have lit the fire, but love kept it burning, deeper and steadier than I ever imagined it could again. For the first time in so many years, I did not feel invisible. I did not feel forgotten or discarded. In his arms, I was more alive than I had ever been, desired beyond words, cherished beyond reason. Every kiss reminded me that I was not just surviving, I was living, breathing, aching, burning. It was in that fire that I found myself again, alive and unafraid to want. There was a safety in his arms that I had never known before, a safety that did not silence passion, but invited it to unfold without hesitation. It was as if the body and soul had been waiting for this moment all along, waiting for a place where desire did not feel rushed or stolen, but cherished and free. The world outside could have crumbled, and I would not have noticed, because in that space, wrapped in him, time itself seemed to surrender. Every second stretched long and sweet, carrying with it the promise that nothing had to be hidden anymore. The passion that grew there was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was not frantic or careless. It was deliberate, slow, unrestrained, and yet tender. Every touch sank deep, reaching places inside me that I had long believed were gone. His hands did not just explore, they healed. His mouth did not just kiss, it restored. There was no separation between love and desire, no line dividing them, because with him they were one and the same. Each breathless moment, each shiver running across my skin, was filled with both the heat of hunger and the sweetness of love. The way he held me was not only about possession, but about devotion. It was the way his lips lingered against mine, as if he wanted to memorize every taste, every sigh. It was the way his touch moved with both urgency and reverence, as though he could not get enough but still wanted to honor every part of me. It was the way he looked at me in the silence between the storms of passion, his eyes telling me that I was not just desired, I was cherished. For so long, I had lived without this. For so long, I had convinced myself that this kind of intimacy belonged only to memory, to youth, to a version of myself that no longer existed. But in his arms, I was proven wrong. Every moan, every trembling gasp, every moment of surrender reminded me that passion does not fade with time. It only waits for the right hands, the right eyes, the right heart to awaken it. The passion we shared was more than the body could contain. It was the soul crying out in gratitude, the heart breaking free of the chains it had carried. In those moments, I was not just touched, I was alive. I was not just kissed, I was consumed. Every movement, every whisper of his breath against my skin, every deep connection that left me trembling and gasping was the rediscovery of something greater than desire. It was love in its truest form, not timid, not careful, but wild and liberating. What we found together was not the fleeting fire that burns and fades, but the kind that grows hotter with every passing moment, deeper with every surrender. There was no guilt, no hesitation, no thought of what was lost or what had been missed. There was only the present, burning with intensity, alive with truth. To give myself fully, to open completely, to feel passion without restraint, it was not just an act of love, it was an act of freedom. I realized then that passion is not about the years lived or the youth lost. It is about being seen fully and still being wanted. It is about trusting someone enough to let go, to be vulnerable, to surrender without fear. With him, I found that freedom, and with that freedom came a passion so deep it felt eternal. Every touch, every kiss, every moment in his arms reminded me that this was not just the body's hunger being fed, it was the soul's liberation. And in that liberation, I found the truth I had been searching for all along. Love and desire, when they are real, are inseparable. They burn together, heal together, and in their fire, they give life back to what was once forgotten. It was in his arms that I was reborn, free, whole, and alive. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the depths of passion, longing, and rediscovered love. Each story is a reminder that it's never too late to feel alive again. Stay with us, the next story may be the one that changes everything for you.